Hi, and welcome back to Continual. It is time to throw the saddle on the spaceship and see if we can put six shooters on those robots. We're going to be talking about space westerns and sci-fi westerns and all kinds of fun stuff tonight. I am your host, Jim Nettles, and let's go around and see who else is coming into this little roundup. So, Bebe, you're up first.
Bebe Bayliss, I write horror and sci-fi, of course, and mystery, suspense, and paranormal, often with co-writer Gini Koch.
Okay, so Jenny.
I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and genres. And like Bebe said, we write many things in those different lengths and genres together.
Lee?
Hi, I'm Lee Martindale. I sling short fiction as a writer and editor. I own a small publishing company. I call it NanoPress. It's too small to be micropress. And I love SF sci-fi westerns.
Misty?
I am Misty Massey. I'm the author of the Mad Kestrel series of pirate fantasy adventures. I am the editor and a contributor to the anthologies The Weird Wild West and Lawless Lands, Tales of the Weird Frontier, both of which are weird Western stories. And I am getting ready to have a 3-book series of weird Westerns, the Dead Man series, coming out from Falstaff later this year.
And James.
Hey everybody, J.E. Pittman here. Just call me James. J.E.'s for the Googles. I write urban fantasy and action sci-fi. The Felix Chance series of urban fantasy books features a very talkative, long-winded immortal alchemist who, at some point in the series, hangs out west. Bigfoot may or may not be involved. And I also write in Pandora Squad about kind of like a Wild Bunch type gang stranded on a desert planet fighting, well, basically giant bugs. So I have a lot of fun with this area.
Well, one of the things about, when we look at Westerns, just a Western setting alone offers a lot because you get a unique landscape. You often get a lot of that rough and tumble, that frontier feeling. So you're already adding in some of that notion of it's not necessarily civilized. And then when we add in a lot of the more fantastical elements, right, the speculative elements to it, we can take that Western setting pretty much any direction because it does settle that way. So, Bebe, what is it about the notion of Westerns and sci-fi that draws you in, and what's a favorite for you?
I love a good mashup of genre. I mean, well, basically sci-fi in anything is fine with me, with a side of more sci-fi is always good. But I also love Westerns. I mean, I grew up in the West of the United States. So the environment is familiar, the cactus, the scorpions and snakes in the backyard. And because I grew up in a Southern California city, but gunslingers as well, it's all familiar territory. My favorite, I'm doing a rewatch right now of Firefly, which remains an all-time, late lamented and beloved, sci-fi Western. So I'm watching it because I'm doing the rewatch while I knew this panel was coming. I paid attention to how that mashup was done, and I was really impressed with how the West was a discrete thing and space was a discrete thing, and yet they meshed really beautifully to keep the focus on being stories about humans, not aliens or other things. It was all, to me, what the best sci-fi and the best Westerns are, is they end up being really intimate stories about humans, what we do to our worlds and what we do to each other. So anyway, big vote for Firefly.
Yeah, and I think I'm one of like 3 people that actually watched it on the original Fox run. So,
right.
So Jenny, how about you?
I didn't watch it on the original Fox run. I saw Serenity in theaters first, and then I went back and got Firefly, and that's my vote for the best mashup of it. But I think one of the reasons why it's good is something akin to what Bebe said. It's not overwhelmingly Western. It's not overwhelmingly space. What it is, however, is the new frontier. It's not the Star Trek New Frontier where they're going to find, these different planets. This is a world that humanity is expanded around in the universe or in the galaxy. And, like Bebe said, what we're doing to everything and everything else. But I think one of the things I like, I'm a Westerns to sci-fi girl, not a sci-fi to Westerns girl. So what I like about Westerns is the fact that you are in an uncharted, usually uncivilized area. You can find some civilization, but civilization is not necessarily going to help you. And many times it's going to harm you harder than the uncivilized portions. And you're kind of fighting against not just nature, but you're fighting against the civilized people who don't have to do what you do. So using Firefly as an example, they're not willing to bow down to a government they feel is unjust and corrupt. And so they're off doing their own little thing. And they have to be very careful when they come into town. So I like the almost outlaw feel of the crew and everything else. But I think that you can put a Western setting anywhere, because as long as there's desolation or a new frontier or a new planet or anything else, you have a Western setting. How you use it is up to you. But pretty much if you're fording out, going where man hasn't really gone before, that's the Western feeling of, that. And the Old West did not last that long. We civilized pretty quickly. So, for us, it's that short gap of period of time, that we hold as what the Old West was. And that's all exploration and danger and one man or one group fighting, against everything to survive. So that's what I like about it. And Firefly, number one with a bullet.
Lee?
I'm going to take you back to 1965 and the original Wild Wild West. The one with Robert Conrad as Jim West, St. Ross Martin as Artemis Gordon, and Michael Dunn in one of the recurring characters as Nicolito Loveless. I love that show. And the reason I loved it, it was my first encounter way back then of steampunk. There were the gadgets that Artemis Gordon built, and the weaponry, and just imagination running rampant. It was lighthearted. It was fun. It was not without its male charms, and it was something we hadn't seen before, as far as I can remember. At least, of course, I had my head in the book. I was a freshman in high school, but I came up for that one because it was something I liked, and I think what it did. It wasn't as sci-fi, series sci-fi back then, was hardware and hard noses. And this one laughed at itself about half the time. So that's what I liked about it.
And Robert Conrad got his shirt off every other episode, which is why it's probably my favorite all-time television show.
That was running rather a lot back then. I don't know if they were getting past the censors or what, but wasn't the only character to do that. I seem to remember Starship somewhere. But yeah, I know what you mean.
All right, Misty, how about you? What is it about Wild West that that pulls you in, that speculative fiction in the Old West, and what is a good favorite of yours?
Well, I think the thing about the West as a setting for fantasy and for science fiction is that even though, yes, we have civilized the whole country, we really haven't civilized the desert, and a great portion of the West is still empty of definitely of white people. And so when we do go out there, there's an otherness. There's a possibility that magic still exists. It kind of fits in with the fables about how there was once magic until everything became urban and industrial, and that just chased the magic away, that put an end to it. And so in the desert, though, and in the high country like Montana and Wyoming and stuff, there's so much emptiness. There's so much nobody, that, you can look at the sky, like your background, you can look at the sky and actually see stars. That's weird to somebody who lives even in a somewhat countrified area like I do, where my neighbor put up a street light, and so now I can barely see any stars. And people in cities never see stars. And just the idea that you can see stars is pretty magical in and of itself. But I think that's the thing about the West, is there's still so much possibility. There's so much maybe magic floating around that we just haven't found and we haven't chased away yet. And I think that's a fun and exciting thing that might be true. I don't know, but it's true for me. And yeah, I'm going to go with Lee. My favorite has got to be the original Wild Wild West. I was going to marry Artemis Gordon when I was a little girl because, yes, as cute as James West was, Artemis Gordon was smart and funny and good looking. And so I've always been a smart as sexy kind of girl. And
don't you diss my Jim?
I'm not. You can have it. He's yours. He is all yours. He is all yours. But Artemis
Walking
Gordon
double date. It'll be fine.
Artemis was my boy. He was going to be my husband. And I actually have 4 pages of handwritten fan fiction from when I was 9 years old. And it is the most Mary Sue piece of nonsense you could ever read, because it's about Jim and Artie having to go up against a jewel thief who is a young woman with dark brown eyes and dark brown hair, and she's called the Fox, and she's stealing jewels, and they have to go after her, when of course we know who the little girl was, right? So, but I've never let anybody else read it, and I never will, but I still got those 4 handwritten pages, and I look at them every now and then and just laugh. So so that's my favorite.
That can be an add-in to, a nice little collection somewhere sometime, is the hidden secret. You just don't tell anybody it's there.
I'm going to have to be real famous before I'll admit to that one. So.
Mr. Pittman.
All right. So as we kind of talked about, I really like that fringe aspect, that new frontiers. It really allows for that other to creep in. It allows for, the aliens to be hiding around the corner or fly overhead to refuel, or any kind of like mythological thing to happen. So I love playing with that. I love the malleability of reality in those kind of spaces. And also being far removed from any kind of central authority. You basically can trust the man beside you and the gun on your hip, as I can't remember what series said it, but I'm paraphrasing a bunch of them there. It is all up to your personal responsibility. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your people, and your people got to take care of you. You're in that together. There's nobody coming to help you, and so you just have to make do. So I really love that aspect, those 2 aspects of it. And one of my favorites, obviously Firefly. I'm a brown coat through and through. But since that's been well covered, I'm going to go international and animated with Trigun. I really love that shipwrecked on a desert planet, which you find out in much later episodes. At first, it just looks like Wild West town with a gunslinger who has a giant bounty on his head, causes chaos wherever he goes. And yeah, I really like that show. I think it really depicts that frontier feel, that lack of civilization, that fall of civilization, and the whole self-reliance thing. Because, you know, out in that world, he's basically the only one who might even give a crap enough to save you. Everybody else is just running for the hills.
So, when we look, obviously Firefly, it is one of the standards. If we look back, if we look at, I would say a lot of that 60s era, we saw a lot of the classics, Wild Wild West, Star Trek had their episodes that were Westerns. The entire premise of it was wagon train in space, right? I started that. It's been a long day. But if we look at some of the nature of some of the shows, series, movies, films, universes, again, we can look at the entirety of the Star Wars universe as being a Western in space. When we look at Tatooine and so many of the planets that are used, so many of the spinoffs pull onto that notion of and play with that notion of the big corporate, Coruscant and the giant world versus all the Rim worlds are basically, there's that technology. Spaceships come and go, but they're glorified Greyhounds, right? It's people are riding on horseback coming and going. If we look at shows like Westworld or one I hate, I love Cowboys and Aliens. It's a ridiculous premise and it's a fun ride. If we look at things like the Mad Max series, we get to pull on a lot more of that, kind of the horrific elements of it. If we look at any number of these, you can set just about anything there and then use that setting to really sculpt the story. Because that Western setting really pulls something together. Yeah, Lee?
I would submit that exactly what you're talking about is Outland, the Sean Connery.
That was one of the ones I was going to bring up because I will never forget getting towards the end of it. They're out there in the spacesuits and it's the quick draw, right? Out on a mining planet. Even if we look at things like The Expanse, they have a lot of that notion of the mining towns and these things. So, Jenny, what is it you like to see in the story that you only are going to get out of that Western? And, is because, again, having written for things like, the Alien universe, a lot of that set in that same sort of a Western type of feel. What is it for you? What is another one of those great kind of prime examples that you look at that's a favorite that you think does it well for you and has been a good inspiration?
I'm sorry, this is my patented deer trapped in headlights look.
Excellent.
I thought we did that already. Okay.
You gotta pick another. I'm making you pick another, and you get to go pivot on it a little. I'm with Lee and Misty on Wild Wild West. I see Westerns everywhere. I'm going to use something that I actually did not care for, The Mandalorian. I knew everything that was coming because I write novels set in the Old West. So we're watching and I leaned over to my husband and I said, and then this and this and this and this is going to happen. And it did. I made it 4 episodes, something like that before I said, look, I know everything that's going to happen. Nothing surprised me. I'm not watching this to know every single thing. I wanted a surprise. I wanted a twist. I wanted something that wasn't completely predictable. And to me, everything in the Mandalorian was 100% predictable. I have seen Clint Eastwood do this for years. So it didn't appeal to me because while it was hitting every trope and hitting them hard and hitting them accurately, I wanted something that made me feel like I did when I first saw A New Hope. And Mandalorian didn't do that. It didn't give me any surprise. And it's now for people who aren't as drenched in the Westerns as I might be,
People love it. Okay. I'm not going to argue. It's a great thing, but it's not for me. So when I'm watching something that has a Western setup, I want to see certain things, but I still want to be surprised. I want somebody to subvert a trope. These tropes are really old. You could subvert a couple and make it different. You know, Firefly tried. I don't think they didn't have enough time to really get to a point where tropes could be subverted. And I don't even know that they would have. It may be something that we might, if we, could say, oh, we want the whole series, we would have hated it after, episode 9 or something, or season 2. But the show that consistently did it right for me and still does, because I own the whole series, is Wild Wild West. They subverted tropes when they needed to. They utilized them when they needed to. It still stands up today. And so for me, part of it is it's a period piece. So it doesn't feel old and weird because it was already a period piece when it first came out. And it through 4 seasons, 5 seasons, going from black and white to color, losing your best villain to death, everything else, it still was able to take, okay, that trope, we're going to use it, but we're going to subvert it. And do that often enough to remain really interesting. So that's still, I'm going to stick with that one and back.
So which one of those Western tropes do you think they had more fun with?
Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, all of them.
Well,
they really.
Pick one.
This was a show that really clearly everyone on it was having a good time. A lot of the thing that they were doing was they're trying to protect Mexico because Mexico is getting attacked by bad things and they're going in and protecting Mexico, which is not necessarily something a real Secret Service team would do. But Mexico is not necessarily considered the U.S.'s enemy. They're their ally, but if X, Y, and Z happens, they're going to become the enemy through no fault of the U.S. or Mexico. So we're going to go into these little border areas or something and protect our neighbor without our neighbor really knowing we're doing it. So I think I like those episodes the best. But honestly, I love them all. The Wild Wild West to me did not jump a shark until its TV movies that were made, several years after the show ended. The show itself, it's just really stands up. It's really good. And I feel a need for a rewatch coming on now after this.
You're welcome. So Lee, how about you? What are some of the other movies, films, books, and looking again at that story, are there what kind of tropes speak to you out of that?
Let's go to Outland. Okay, we know it's high noon in space. It's the little town in wherever is a mining colony, and it is the Old West. It's lawless for the most part. They've got the corporation is running thing. It's a company town. And they're thoroughly under the thumb. You've got your one good man who shows up, the Sean Connery character. You've got, once he figures out the lay of the land, he doesn't like it and he wants to do something about it. And when he does something about it, suddenly he's in the crosshairs of the company. They send a cleanup team, so to speak, and he is standing alone. The entire town is not going to raise a hand because they know where their bread is buttered. He's got one assistant, and that's the craggy old doctor. And casting Francis Steenburgen in that, not Steenburgen, the lady from Fargo, casting her in that, it was written for a man. They didn't change a word, and it worked. But she's the one help he's got, and you get that whole one man standing in the middle of the street alone, and it's just that to me is the Western, and they do it beautifully. Just the lawless anything goes if you can pay for it or put it on your chit for the company to take out of your pay. It's up for grabs, including wine, rot gut, and dong. It is, it lays out the territory and it runs the drill. And the drill is entertaining, just like it always is in the Westerns.
Misty, how about you?
I think one of the tropes that I really like is having to stay one step ahead of authority in some fashion, whether you're wanted for a crime or whether you're just wanting to get into something and you know that you'd be stopped by authority. Maybe you found a good deal and you don't want them coming and stopping you, whatever it is. I like that idea of having to always be looking over your shoulder. And so with that said, I'm going to actually mention two, but I'll mention real quick. One's a TV show, Cowboy Bebop, which was an anime, and it was about a bunch of bounty hunters they're space bounty hunters, and they go every episode, they go looking for their latest bounty to try to earn some money, and it all goes horribly wrong most of the time. But then there's also a book, I'm pretty sure it's out of print now, so I apologize. But if you can find one in a used bookstore, or it might be available online somewhere, but it's called The Last Stand of the DNA Cowboys by Mick Farren. It was written in the 70s, and it beautifully combines Westerns and sci-fi and the new weird that was really hot right then in the early 70s, like Michael Moorcock and people like that, Philip Dick, that were writing that. It combines those elements into a really wonderful little adventure. Reeve and Billy Oblivion and the Minstrel Boy are the DNA Cowboys, and they're running from some assassins. And Reeve is wanted as a deserter from his previous life, and Billy thinks he's going nuts. And so they're running from themselves and they're running from authority, and it's weird, so it's fun, but it happens on Earth, kind of. So either whether you're on Earth or whether you're in space, that running from authority and running from civilization trope is what I like a lot.
James?
So I really like the resourcefulness angle, and also kind of that unflappability, because a lot of these main characters are, dealing with, they're dealing with the Western expansion, the trains coming to town. Well, okay, we'll extend that a little further. And okay, suddenly you've got these mad scientists with all their other newfangled devices that are amping things up. And they just kind of have to take it in stride and deal with it. There are several ones, but one I really liked, and yes, I have a soft spot for all the shows Fox kind of screwed over. The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. Mm-hmm. Mr. Bruce Campbell's turn in the Stetson with a horse and a lightning gun. He just had to encounter mad scientists and just deal with it. And that, chin up as only Bruce can fashion. And it just kind of that, like I said, the resourcefulness, deal with the situation's got with the hand he's dealt, and somehow he gets out of it.
Bebe?
I think I wouldn't say it's a trope. I'd say it's more shared DNA between sci-fi and Westerns, is that a lot of the plots revolve around the slaughter of a native population, whether it's space bugs or Native Americans or giant animals, whatever it is. It's often imperative to annihilate the native population so that resource extraction can begin, because mining, whether the resource is labor or a mineral or something that you find in the ground, annihilation of native populations is a really big thing. And I've been thinking about how some shows sidestep that. So back to Firefly. All the worlds are either in space, so it's a big spaceship, so there's no indigenous population, or they're newly formed, terraformed worlds where, again, the minute you arrive on it, you're a settler and all of that. So I'm trying to think of sci-fi. I mean, you have to go back to Martian Chronicles and Ray Bradbury before you start to think about Old West type settings in sci-fi or Starship Troopers, more Golden Age sci-fi where the annihilation of a native population is really part of it. It seemed like more contemporary sci-fi doesn't want to look at that, which I think is a really interesting statement on all of us. And I just want to give a shout out I was going to mention Briscoe County Jr. because they've got Buffalo Soldiers. Oh my God, there were black people in the Old West. And that was the first time, I can't remember the character's name, but that was the first time that kind of a character was centered in this storytelling rather than just being a peripheral person. And I wish that show was somewhere I could watch it because I have a really, really long-term crush on Bruce Campbell. So I just want to watch him be Bruce Campbell again. Anyway, James, you had a question or a comment.
Oh, I was going to say, I have an example for you of the native population being annihilated. There's actually on my list to talk about Defiance. Sci-fi show. It's where aliens come to Earth to, well, not unterraform the planet and change it to their needs to take all the resources and wipe us out off of it. It's really fun because, well, one, it's a great Western settlement integration of populations. Like we literally stopped their transformation of the planet halfway through, so Earth has become this mishmash world, all frontier again, and it deals with it from the alien perspective. It's set in St. Louis. So alien perspective, the American perspective, and there's actually Native American tribe perspective. It's like, oh yeah, we've been through this before. So that's a good one. I think a good example for what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was done in 2010-ish, somewhere around there.
And don't forget V, which was done way earlier. It wasn't set up as a Western, even though it's an invasion series and they're trying to eat us. So it kind of fits. I don't think it fits in the Western trope, but we do have a couple of people fighting and trying to lead the townsfolk to safety. Yeah. But yeah.
And Bebe,
to your point about the Buffalo Soldier, that was Lord Bowler, played by Julius Carey.
Right.
I just looked it up.
Thank you.
I know, it's going to bug me too.
I was sitting there trying to look.
I was sitting here going, Lord something.
Doesn't he become a recurring character?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's the sidekick.
Yeah.
And Bebe, I have the DVDs. Come on over to the house and bring the nice weather with you. And
have the box set.
Will do.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into, maybe some of y'all's own stuff. So, Lee, let's look and talk a little bit maybe about some of your own writings and things like this that dabble into, or in some cases ride hard into, that Western world of speculative fiction. So, what's a piece of yours and what drove you to write it? What is it about that kind of setting?
Okay, the story is called Lady Blaze. The tagline on it is spacefaring whorehouse, Madam Who Tells It Like It Is, and space pirates. The first person that read the thing said, this is in the Firefly universe. And I went, no. And they went, yes. It, it, it's the voice and the thing. What prompted me to write it, was I was watching, I scanned across and they were running Gunsmoke on TV. One of the channels that run old TV series. And I flashed on Miss Kitty. I saw a picture of her and I went, you know, nobody's ever run it from the saloon girl standpoint and took off from there. Only I put it in space in a spaceship and visiting various planets that aren't too big. They're not big enough to have the local working population, i.e., the girls and boys and others. They're not the settlements they stop at are not big enough, but they have organized into houses. They're still independent contractors, and it was that whole saloon girl in space. Space pirates come in because they kidnapped a kid and they're going after it. But what I think what prompted me to write it was I could get more than one story out of those characters. And if I made them mobile enough, i.e. spaceship, I could get all kinds of stories, but still with a kind of a Western feel to it, because, you know, a truly civilized organization wouldn't consider them outcasts. So that's what got me started, and it worked out very well. In fact, I got to play her for one whole con, and because it was a steampunk convention, we were doing late 1800s. So I was Lady Blaze for a whole weekend, and it was fun. You don't get to do that much.
Misty, how about you?
Well, what I'm finishing up right now, I'm getting ready to turn into my publisher, is a set of 3 novellas that I call the Dead Man series, and I'm hoping that I get to write 3 more. But the idea is that Doc Holliday has been brought back from the dead several years after his death, and I was asked specifically to use Doc in the stories because I know that Doc's been done in other things before, but I'm trying to go about it a little differently. For one thing, he's come back long enough after his death that I can have fun with it, because I don't have to worry about what getting it accurate to his history, because he's already dead in the real world. So I can have fun with the character. But he's been brought back from the dead specifically to help hunt down a certain kind of demon that has risen in in California and the Old West, and well, the tail end of the Old West, really. And he's working with the Shadow Council, which is John Hartness's world. So I'm writing in that world with John Hartness's permission. Of course, he's the one that asked me to. And so Doc and his compatriot Iena are going around the West, working for the Shadow Council, making sure that magic is used safely or taken custody of if it's not being used safely. And in the meantime, hunting for this particular demon that's threatening to knock California off the map.
James, how about you?
Like everything, it just leads over into all my writing. So, best example is going to be Felix. He is that lone gunfighter, that one guy standing up to what's wrong, the one who can get you out of any jam you're in. And in parts of Felix, specifically in the second book, he is out west. He is out robbing bootleggers with Sasquatch at his side,
As you do.
and Thunderbird, Lenny the Thunderbird, hanging out with him. So I do actually have him set out west, and yes, there is a train heist at one point. That was super fun to write. But that again, that resourceful character, the one who just deals with things as they come up and faces all the adversity. I take that and I put it in there. And another way I like to use it, my action sci-fi series Pandora, where I really take that setting of the West. I have like the Diamond Desert that's literally grinding their boots off their feet, blowing so hard they can't breathe, and they just have to kind of go gunslinger and shoot their way out of all the trouble they get into. So it's sometimes that simple. It's just kind of a good go-to for action, and just that, you don't have any way out but to blow your way out of it, or blow something up, or shoot your way, or yeah, it's just all kinds of fun.
Bebe?
My first foray into a mashup of those is a story that ended up in the Familiars, Zombie Needs Brains anthology. It's called Have Voodoo Will Travel. And the beginning of that was Gini called me and said, I have this idea for a paranormal detective, but it needs to be Weird West, and I know I can rely on you to add that extra layer of weird that it really needs. So yes, my nickname is Weird Bebe, so that tracks. So it was fun to work so closely with Gini, who has a deep knowledge of the Old West, and then just layer all the weird in that I could. And because I don't have the same experience with Old West except as a reader, it was so much fun to add just entirely unhinged ideas and mush them together and make them work. And, she said, give me some ideas. And I sat down and wrote like 2,000 words of just, well, here's some weird brainstorming. So that was great. And our story is the origin story of how our paranormal detective becomes a paranormal detective. And that was a first for me as well, having the luxury to start right at the very beginning. So, learning as I go, building the 747 while I'm flying it, but really, really a fun genre matchup. And with a good guide, because every Western adventure needs a guide. In writing this, mine was Ginny.
So, Jenny, how about for you? What's something out of all the stuff you've done? Because, a lot of your stuff falls into that speculative fiction Western in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Well, as A.E. Stanton, I write novels set in the Old West. So every trope which I've met from an Old Western trope, hello, I know how to use them. But other than Have Voodoo Will Travel, for me, it's my Alexander Outland's Space Pirate series written as G.J. Koch. I love the gunslingers. I love the outlaws. I like the sheriffs. I like all the stuff. But you give me a good con man, gambler, and I'm a sucker for that person. And that's what Alexander Outland is. He's the best pilot in the galaxy. He's also a great con man, and he's all these things. But somehow stuff goes wrong and right at the same time. So it's very funny. I personally think this is the funniest thing I've ever written, but it's also got all the tropes. They're running from the law and they somehow get stuck on a planet where now they have to help or else, and then they have to figure out how to get through here and realize that there's a big conspiracy over there. And somehow along the way, his crew gets larger despite his desires for that to not happen. So I like it because it's fun and it's funny. And he's my favorite kind of character, and I don't get to write these characters all the time, which is the con man who, he's probably going to gamble and beat you because he, in some cases, steal, and in other cases, he's cheating. but I really like that particular trope out of the Old West, and there's always in a team up, like in Magnificent Seven, both the original movie, the television show, the remake movie. You've always got the gambler, but he's always like the side guy. And even in The Great Escape, the scrounger is still the side guy. And my favorites are the scroungers. So I got to write a whole thing about what happens when this guy is stuck with just a little more authority and responsibility than he wants. Not that he's not capable of handling, but he would prefer to not be doing any of this. He does not want to be a hero because heroics do not pay. Smuggling pays, pirating pays, heroics they don't pay. So I enjoy doing that. That's a lot of fun for me, and also apparently for readers. So that's nice too. So I hit all of those tropes, but it's very space. I mean, he is in a spaceship. He is a space pirate, but there's still the big expanse between planets. Each planet they go to is like, I'm in a new town and this isn't good. They're not traveling. I mean, they're at the spaceport towns. So they're not traveling all over each world, or well, sometimes they have to, but it's the same kind of Old West feel of, me and my gang were galloping. We've robbed a bank and we did it well, and no one's caught us. And oh crap, here we are in a land battle, and we have to side with somebody to get past the land battle. Darn it, we sided with the helpless people. Dang it. Okay, we have to save the helpless people and move on. So I just like that kind of stuff, and it's fun to do.
Well, we look at fundamentally, this is one of the core tenets of story we see. I mean, because we can go back to ancient myths and see a lot of the same ideas and concepts, right? The wilderness, the magic out there, gods, monsters, and everything else in between, being so many of the elements of speculative fiction that we pull in that Western setting, right? It sank in when I was in Greece last year, and going through some of that countryside that is very rough. Same thing going through some of Italy. You see a landscape that is rough. It's challenging. It's hot. It's a hard place to survive. And you start going and seeing why so many of these stories have come about and why they framed the way they did. And I think this is a big part of the magic as to why these Western type settings set so well for speculative stories, is it does contain, like we were talking about earlier, that sense of magic, that sense of wonder, and that sense of it's not quite what we're used to, especially if you're used to being in much more suburban and urban areas and you're not spending your time in the countryside. It's a very different thing. And when we look at some of the stories that we haven't touched on, I mean, if you think about some of the older things, let's look back at like stories of John Carter, right? John Carter of Mars. You've got, they're Martian Westerns set back. We look at it at the time when those are set. If we look at stories again of a more modern age, if we look at the Mad Maxes of the world, if we look at, things like the Dark Tower series, you can find, the gunslinger is, we start with the gunslinger makes his way. And I mean, even if we look at one of my own personal guilty favorites of, Flash Gordon, you find that blend of the incredulous, the spectacular, but the thing that still feels just familiar enough, even to be that fish out of water. There's a ton of elements we've not talked about speculative fiction Westerns. So this is your chance to figure out what do you want to talk about we haven't gotten to. So Misty, I'm going to start with you on this one.
That's Misty's deer trapped in headlights look.
Smack me in the face with a 2x4. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and this is going to be what's going to incentivize me to create a clip show of nothing but deer in the headlights looks.
You're a mean man, Jim.
He is. He is.
Y'all just figured that out?
I don't know that I've actually. You know what? One other thing about westerns now, you don't see it much in space westerns, although they do occasionally get brought into the story. But horses, I love horses. I was a horse girl from way back. I was that kid in 6th grade who had not an inch of her room's walls uncovered because there were horse posters on horse posters everywhere. And I begged my parents for horseback riding lessons and rode until I graduated high school. But so I love the fact that that so much of westerns is dependent on horses and animals, because I just love animals. And now, yeah, you don't see that as much in space westerns, but then again, occasionally you do. In one of the Star Trek: The Next Generation episodes, Picard he gets into trouble because he's gone back to the ship to get his saddle so that he can go riding, because there are horses. So I love horses, and I love when horses have something to do with the story. Because in real life, we were so dependent on them for so many things, and I love when they get their due in science fiction stories too. There are horses in the book that I mentioned, The Last Stand of the DNA Cowboys. They travel on horseback. Jim West had an amazing horse that he rode. I'm not sure if it was it an Andalusian? I'm not sure if it was an Andalusian or not, but it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of
Yes,
horsemanship.
it was Andalusian.
The big Andalusian. Okay. Yeah, it was a gorgeous horse, and it was Jim West's horse, and you knew it was always that same horse. So I love horses in my sci-fi westerns. So
Well, and you had tauntauns. In the last Star Wars
Yeah,
movie, you see him riding, if I remember if it was a 6-legged horse or something, but basically riding a horse across the top of that one kind of disturbed my inner peace a little bit. But we won't discuss that. But I mean, I think we see that same notion of man and animals, that beast of burden and that blend of the two, where you've got to have that trust between man and animal that's part of that landscape. So I think that's a big piece of it. James?
So something that I I knew in the back of my mind, but I hadn't really put together until the last few years. The Old West was concurrent with Victorian era. So all that scientific advancement going on that led to the advent of steampunk, essentially, can and does bleed over into the Old West. So you can have so much cross-pollination between those two seemingly disparate genres, but throw a cowboy into Victorian England or something like what was it? Oh, Penny Dreadful.
Penny Dreadful.
I liked how they had the cowboy character come in there, even though that's more speculative fiction than, well, they took a scientific angle to it sometimes.
it's
But
steampunky.
yeah, exactly. So I like how, like we've been saying, the Western kind of lends itself to incorporating blends from every. It's an almost an amorphous thing that can really take all kinds of inputs. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about it.
Evie?
I think something that the genres share is this feeling of otherness, and that, typical fish out of water, where sometimes what the technological revolution is just a surprise because you don't know about it. So in the series Bonanza, Hop Sing, the Chinese cook, is accused of a crime, and he introduces fingerprints, what he calls a chop, as evidence that he could not have done the crime because they had a fingerprint, they didn't know what it was. So he was using education, knowledge that his culture had, that the Western culture where he was did not. So again, it's simultaneous knowledge, but just distributed differently, right? Or in Firefly, Dr. Simon Tan brings something completely unknown to the Firefly crew, manners. And again, they think this is a revolution. So I love these odd little sort of grace notes that land in so many of these stories where it's not just an overt, oh, it's a Western, so I'm going to shoot you with a Colt 45 on a different planet. But it's just these little instances of discomfort that go to sort of deepen and illustrate the story a little better.
Jenny?
I'm kind of going to go back to Misty's point about horses. And related to Firefly, several years ago, I was the local guest of honor for DarkCon, and one of the panels was Firefly versus Doctor Who, which is more realistic. And Firefly won. Okay, I was defending Firefly. Why did it win over Doctor I've been running forever Who? Because the guy defending it was just like, who would take horses into space? R. And I'm like, oh, anyone who actually, wanted to get around. You don't have unlimited fuel, but you can grow hay. And you don't have unlimited stuff. You don't have unlimited parts. You don't have unlimited this, but horses can give birth and make more horses because we need those. We're humans. Okay, so humans going to other planets. I mean, one of the Firefly episodes is they are transporting a herd of cattle to get to a world that needs the cattle, right? They need the cattle way more than here's some gasoline, right? Here's a couple power cells. No, you actually need cows because they can work, they can give milk, and you can eat them. And so it's the practical stuff that, like Vicky's saying, those little things, like Simon has manners. Simon, from a Western standpoint, just came in. He's a greenhorn. He just came in from New York City. And the rest of the crew are Westerners, and they're just like, aren't we putting on airs, Mr. Fancy Pants, right? And he's just like, it's a napkin, right? Napkins, right? So that culture clash is not done as well as you would want it to be in most things. And that's one of the things Firefly did really well, and others do as well. I'm not here to say which ones did and didn't do it right, but Firefly, as an example, did it really, really well. And the understanding that we're humans, and if it's humans who are expanding, they still need things. A show I forgot to mention, but that I think is also really good is Killjoys. It's about bounty hunters in space, right? But they still have to park their ship, get off the ship, and interact like they aren't flying out tomorrow. And some of those places require animals or different things to adapt and survive. But most of them were not always like, here, I raced in on my little land speeder to smash myself into the trees. I rode a horse that will, be able to jump something and also perhaps not over a cliff. So I really think that, especially when you're talking about moving out into other planets or moons or whatever we're terraforming, the idea that we don't need the same animals we've needed pretty much that since we domesticated them, I think is ludicrous. And I always appreciate when someone or something shows you that they're still using, sure, they're flying between the planets like this, but when they get off, these people are taking horses. When they get off, these people are riding mules. When they get off, this planet has tauntauns, so they're on tauntauns. So I really like that when it clicks correctly. And the writers obviously did a little thought research as opposed to just, this would be cool. I think that elevates something. Show, movie, book. It just elevates it into this is great.
Well, and like looking at Scalzi's Old Man's War series, one of the later books in that series, they're settling a new world without going into the what's and whys. They part of the population they bring are Amish, and they don't, technology's failing and everything else. So they've got horses, they've got beasts of burden, they've got the ability to use 18th century farming techniques and technologies and capabilities to survive an alien world. And I think that often this is one of those things that, again, that notion of when you're out there exploring, you can't count on technology all the time. You can't count on getting spare parts. You can't count on things, but there's always a way to do it. Sometimes you just got to, drop back, punt, and regress a couple of 100 years.
Heinlein did it beautifully in print in Time Enough for Love.
Mm-hmm.
Went through the whole colonization essentially, and it was brilliant. And I think that's what you were all talking about as far as the self-reliance and the horses. Ginny, I grew up with horses, so it's I first encountered that part in print, so it's something I like to write about.
Well, before we, head off into the West under this one, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, and of course what they need to pick up out of you guys' series as well. So, Bebe?
Bebe Bayliss, bebebayliss.com. All the socials, maybe fewer in the future, depending on how the world goes. I co-write Mystery with Gini Koch, and all of the current and soon-to-be releases are on my website.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Pinterest. Our most recent release was in November as the first in my and Bebe's Santa Paloma mystery series, Something Wicked. And then and that's from Ginger Blue Publishing. And I have the trade release. I got a hard soft contract. And the trade release of my Western novel set in the Old West by A.E. Stanton, Natural Born Outlaws, Legend of Belladonna, Part 1, comes out in February. So, also from Ginger Blue.
Lee?
The story I mentioned, Lady Blaze, is available in Bard's Road, the collected fiction of Lee Martindale, and that is available autographed or plain trade paperback through harphaven.net. There's a link, which is also my website, gives you the bibliography and all that stuff. Harphaven.net also has a link to Harphaven Merchanter, which is the entire big catalog right now of Harphaven Publishing. It also gives you links to the ebooks that are available. So that's where you find me.
Misty?
You can find me at my website, mistymassey.com. You can find me wandering around some of the socials. I'm still on TikTok. I am on Blue Sky very often. I'm occasionally on Facebook. And right now, that's kind of about it for socials. I am also, my books are available on the Zon. But if you don't want to market for them in any fashion, then you are welcome to go to my publisher's pages. The Kestrel books are available from Lore Seekers Press. The Lawless Lands is available from Falstaff. Dead Man series will be available from Falstaff Books. And the Weird Wild West is available from eSpec Books. Just go to their web pages.
And James?
You can find me on halfacrepond.com. That's my main website. And all the socials, the Facebooks, J.E. Pittman Writes, and all the rest are j.e.pittman. My latest right now is the third Felix Chance book. It concludes the first arc of the series. It's called Off Chance. Just released this week as of recording this. So that's my latest and greatest. I'm working on something new, a spin-off of Felix, focusing on the alchemist character. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at Continual. And we will see you again soon.